if you have a traditional view of investing in development of our people that is based on competency and skill set alone, then you're not going to be able to move your leaders to this space. You have to be able to invest in leadership development, which is understanding behavior, thinking patterns, behavioral intent, and actual behavior, and help move your workforce progressively towards more constructive leadership behavior across your full cohort. That is actually your biggest driver of culture shift within an organization.
Good morning, HR. I'm Mike Coffey, president of Imperative, bulletproof background checks with fast and friendly service. And this is the podcast where I talk to business leaders about bringing people together to create value for all stakeholders. As a follow-up to our last couple episodes about recruiting and interviewing, I'm joined today to discuss new hire onboarding by Anthony Sork. Anthony is managing director of Sork HC. That's what they call HR down under. He's a recognized thought leader in employee perception measurement, and the tools he created, including the award-winning Employee Attachment Inventory, are used by employers across the globe to create highly engaged, high-performance teams. Welcome to Good Morning HR, Anthony.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me.
So you and I met probably 10 years ago at HR Southwest. It's been a while.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad I finally got you on to agree to come on the podcast. But what really struck me about this particular topic right now, in light of we're talking about interviewing and recruiting recently, in a LinkedIn post I saw that you put out there, you called out what you called the new hire risk crisis. So let's just start with that. What's the new hire risk crisis?
Well, thanks for reading the LinkedIn post for a start. It's good to know that when you put things out there that people are paying attention. So thank you for that. Look, the new hire risk crisis is probably not a new crisis, but it's certainly one that is growing and exacerbating and probably going to become more obvious to organizations over the coming couple of years. When we have a look at the way in which employees come into an organization, there is a phenomenon called attachment. It's the phase of emotional bonding where the bond is actually forming. And that particular mechanism is something that has been well researched, well known. We happen to be the organization that was able to look at that, demonstrate it, and create an opportunity to measure and manage it relative to social structure bonding, and in particular in a workplace context. What we are seeing at the moment is that there has always been a relatively poor understanding and a relatively poor focus on the actual emotional bond mechanism. Typically, organizations have focused on what they do to employees during that induction and onboarding period. And then they measure what they have done relative to things like post-induction surveys and ultimately in engagement surveys. The post that I put up there was really on the back of some recent research that's been released by Qualtrics and also by Gallup that really is highlighting that we have a growing and intensifying problem that is about to hit that will show up in engagement metrics across the globe, where we are already seeing a decline in engagement happening without significant changes taking place in engagement initiatives across organizations. We are starting to see an erosion in the engagement levels. And when you break that down based on what the research findings from both Gallup and from Qualtrics is showing, is that we have a real weakening in the engagement level of managers. And the flow-on effect of the weakening level of engagement in managers means that for new hires coming into the organizations, they are less capable of focusing on and impacting the new hire bonding mechanism. And so this is going to be an intensifying effect where we are seeing that it's showing up also in the research where the new hire sentiment is dropping significantly. you have somewhere in the vicinity of around about, I had the figures down before, about 38%, I think it is, of new hires measured at about the 6 month mark had an intention to stay for 3 or more years. That's only 38%, and that's actually declining. And so when we have a look at this connection between reduced manager engagement, the way in which the managers are critical in terms of supporting the formation of the attachment bond during the induction onboarding period, what we call the critical attachment period, then you are going to see a continuation of this decline in new hire bonding. And the flow-on effect of that over time is going to be that then becomes representative of the resting line of engagement for your workforce. So without doing anything about it, we are going to see a continuation of the decline of engagement. That was a long response for you, Mike. I hope that positioned it all right, though.
No, that's yeah. Let me put it in terms that even somebody as dumb as me would understand. I think. Let me see if I can get this right. So we talk about employee engagement a lot, and that's about the employee's connection to the work they're doing and how they feel about that. But you're saying before that, before we even really focus on employees' engagement around what they're doing, we need to work on their attachment, how they're, when they first arrive in the organization, how they feel about the organization, how connected they feel to the organization itself. So those would be drivers like how they're treated by their new manager, and how their new leader uh, trains and orients them, invests in them and in their personal time, those kinds of things. I'm sure we'll get into more of that. But is that right? So attachment is the feeling about the organization, and and just like a new child is formed almost immediately as soon as that person walks into the office, right? That first interaction, and then engagement's what is the follow on. How do they feel about the job? But if you're not attached to the work, you're going to be less engaged by the job. Is that about right?
Yeah, it is, and so when we look at this phenomenon of engagement, which is a great umbrella term to think about, what's this sort of group of people, this cohort of people? What's the sentiment? How are they feeling about being here? Those measures are typically annualized and aggregate measurements in organisation, and typically what they're trying to get is a little bit of a pulse check on what is the sentiment and experience about people at the moment that has a flow-on effect to this notion of discretionary effort, which flows on to performance. And so when organizations do these sorts of measures, again, they tend to be, large cohorts at a point in time measure, and then they look at those results in the aggregate. They are useful, and they give you some insight to what happened. Yeah, so you're looking in the rear vision mirror. So that's a lag measure of what we have done to create an experience for our people that have led to a level of engagement. When we have a look at emotional bonding, it's a little bit different in that what our research has led us to be able to do is that the emotional bond mechanism is actually the root cause of ultimately what you measure in engagement. So rather than waiting for the measure to say what happened, we're actually wanting to look at the bond, the strength of bond in real time. And when we do that, there are distinct stages of the employee life cycle that you want to take a focused look at. There's a couple of outer bookends that are more difficult to take a direct line of sight look at, but they would be your employer branding impact on potential talent in the marketplace. So the way in which you're attracting talent to your organization, even potentially before you have an active role to recruit against. It's that positioning of your brand. At that point in time, there is an emotional bond strength between you and prospective talent in the marketplace. At the moment that you have a role to recruit for and you're seeking to attract particular talent, that's the point that actually the formation of attachment perceptions actually start. Now, they are impacting a range of candidates who are applying for that position, but only one or possibly more, depending on how many positions you've got available. But only the successful candidates are going to be the ones that we then put into, I guess, the organization experience that will start to shape and strengthen that bond. So you were right to say parent-child. Attachment research is actually based in far smarter people than me for a lot longer than me. It goes back to filial bonding research. Lorenz, who was a Nobel recipient, was able to demonstrate how the biological mechanism of bonding happens across the animal kingdom. And so it's typically been focused on by relative to offspring and parent bonding. And when you put that into the human species, that's where it gets the label of attachment and focus predominantly on early childhood development and the attachment phenomenon. And you've got Bowlby and Ainsworth and others that have built a huge body of evidence around attachment. When it comes to social structure attachment, what we said is that bond actually also forms between the individual and the social structure. So not just the individual to the primary carer, but the individual to the social structure. And that mechanism, that bond, is still influenced most significantly by the behavioral impact of the primary carer, the immediate manager. And so when we talk about the crisis that's looming, if that primary carer, their engagement level, and when we have a look at their engagement, what we would say is what's the strength of the emotional bond at that point for that manager? And we call that connection. So the relative strength of sustaining that emotional bond. If that bond has weakened in that manager, and they are no longer strongly connected, the impact that they'd have as a primary carer on a new hire bonding mechanism coming in is going to be less effective. And so they'll pay less attention to it. They'll go through the motions. They won't be neglectful in their duties, but the focus on what are we doing to strengthen that emotional bond and how do we measure and manage it in real time rather than waiting for an annual aggregate measure and then trying to cut a demographic for new hires. What we believe is that, and that should be happening, is that we should be, and you can, measure it during the critical attachment period for new talent and then intervene by the primary carer being aware of what's going on in terms of the formation of that bond and what can we do to strengthen it before the end of the bonding period. And you have a limited window. You got 120 days. That's the bonding period of new employees coming into a work environment. Once you hit 120 days, their attachment perceptions, the bond sets, and that becomes the resting point for engagement. And this is where the risk comes. If your resting point of engagement is lower than you want, ultimately, as your turnover washes through your organization, that then becomes the resting point of engagement for your full cohort. And so we're seeing this diminishing level of attachment flowing through while also acknowledging a dropping level of engagement connection for managers across the workforce.
So this all makes sense because we've always heard about people getting involved in churches or in gangs on the other side, but they're looking to identify with a tribe to connect with some group of other people that they feel like there's some meaning, there's some connection, there's some respect, they're heard, they're seen, those kind of things. And why wouldn't we want that for where we spend half our waking hours, and so that would make sense. And I don't think, I think most of us kind of intuitively have an idea that we do need managers who are actively connecting to their employees, who are paying attention to what's going on, with enough emotional intelligence to read the employees, responses to questions, or how they present themselves in the office, and how you have interactions with them. But putting an actual measurement to that, and you're saying that has to, and you said we've got an employer brand out there. There may be this person's never interacted with the company, but there are companies in every city that people say, "Ooh, I'd like to work there one day," because they know somebody who's worked there or they've heard great things about this company. But then you're saying, but when you post the job is really where that first direct interaction with that person starts to build that attachment, and then you move through the interview process, then ultimately you're selected. So some of your groundwork has already been done, good or bad, before they've even stepped foot and accepted an offer in the organization. So, can we walk through some of the things that you see employers do well or do wrong in just the job posting and interview process that affects their ultimate success in onboarding?
Yeah, look, I mean, the list is long, and there are some people that do, there are some people that do some really great stuff, and there are some people that don't pay enough attention to that stage. And to be fair, when we measure attachment, we're measuring that at the 90th day of employment from day one, right? And so when we're measuring that, because that's the first valid and reliable measure of what attachment's going to be at the 120 days when it ends, as long as there's no significant behavioral change by the primary care or the manager. But there are some of the drivers. So the way that attachment sort of hangs together is that you have four core perceptions that are developing, and that's security and safety, trust and value, acceptance, and belonging. So those four core perceptions in any social structure environment, and you mentioned a few. One of the things about attachment is that everyone's really familiar with it because we experience it firsthand, and we see people we care about in our lives experiencing it firsthand as well. Anyone with children of school age is seeing attachment play out in real time at the beginning of every school year. The way that the primary carer in, let's say it's a primary school environment, the way the primary carer in that classroom behaves and has an impact on the sense of security and safety, trust and value, acceptance and belonging of the student is going to have a massive impact on the way in which that child feels that they want to engage and participate in the classroom and in learning, and the way that they are actually going to end up applying discretionary effort and performing throughout the entire year. And so this is a phenomenon where if we look around any social structure in our lives, we can see attachment playing out, and we have felt it ourselves. It's that first impressions matter, and they are most significantly influenced by whoever we perceive to be the sort of the primary influencer or the primary carer in that setting. For organizations that are thinking about the way that they position in the marketplace a job that they're recruiting for, if you are just positioning the role itself, the duties, the responsibilities, and maybe some things like guidance around remuneration, though I'm not sure how many organisations like to do that these days. But you're trying to attract talent to you based on your needs. One of the things you've got to really continue to think about is the way in which you're continuing to position your employer value proposition to the employee. So what's the employee value proposition? What are we going to do to make this an environment and experience that is going to be something that you want to be part of, that you can see that we as an entity are doing good things that you believe in. So, how do they connect to the purpose of the organization? How do they experience that sort of feeling of you're going to see me, you're going to value me, you're going to care for me, and that this is somewhere where I really want to come and be part of as well. And some organizations, back to your question, neglect that a little bit, right? So in terms of the positioning of how we're positioning the role, don't forget to position the who are we as an organization, and how do we see our people, how do we treat our people. That's got to be part of that. The actual mechanics of the experience can really get in the way, right? I mean, if you've got more than a 3-step process to recruitment and selection, you're automatically putting a timeline in there that is going to be problematic for you with top talent in the marketplace who are actively seeking a role, who are going through onerous multi-stage processes that make it feel that they're not measuring up, or that there's something missing, or that they don't feel that they've been valued yet sufficiently enough to be told yes or no. That can get in the way, right? And I understand that organizations want to be thorough, that they want to have a really good battery of selection mechanisms in place. They want key stakeholders to be involved. All of that makes sense, but you've got to come back and say, what's the experience we're creating for the employee during that process as well? And who are the people actually involved in that? What are they doing to think about how do we actually impact the emotional bonding process and mechanism that's taking place, rather than simply saying, well, you're just a good off the shelf that we're choosing whether to buy you or not, right? It's a two-way process. The last part,
And I think that's true. I think a lot of what I hear from job seekers, even at the executive level, is that maybe they were passive candidates. A recruiter reached out to them and said, "Hey, I've got this great position that you would be a great fit for," and so they're thinking, "Okay, these people are gonna they're gonna be interested in me," but then the process itself, they find out this recruiter's also brought in 5 other candidates, which is not bad, but now I'm more of a commodity. And now, okay, we do an initial call, then maybe we do a an interview of some sort, and then they say we've got other people. We'll call. We'll talk to you soon. We've got other people we want to talk to. You'll hear from us soon. And then it's 3 weeks, and then okay, we want you to go through another interview process,
yeah.
and then there's a third or fourth, and you get the feeling they're winnowing it down. So at least you've made the cut, but now if that's not handled right, you do feel like you're a commodity in the process. And this is, and that's why a lot of employers seem to, especially in the last 3 or 4 years, to be very overcautious in their process. But when I talk to them, most of the time they say, "Yeah, the person we hired is the person we thought we were going to hire, but we just wanted to kiss all the frogs and make sure nobody else turned into a prince." And I think it's not a great feel for those candidates. And so I can see how before the offer's even done, they're considering, is this really a place that I'm going to want to work, and with people I want to work with.
That experience is going to shape the expectations or the understanding of how you're likely to treat them if they're the successful candidate. But it also has a massive impact, that whole experience, on the unsuccessful candidates as well, by the way, which then go back into the market and have an impact on your employer brand. So the two groups that have a really big impact on your employer brand positioning in the market, that have an impact on whether people are going to be attracted to your organization in the future, are going to be unsuccessful candidates in the recruitment process, and how I was treated, how I was regarded, and how did we close that experience out? Did I feel respected through the process? Unsuccessful, yes, but did I get a chance to learn? Did I feel respected? Am I being encouraged to either go and plug any gaps that might be there, or if it was a line call, please consider applying again for the future, or how do we maintain connection with them? The other big group that impacts your employer brand in the marketplace are your past employees. So once people leave, how they were treated on the way out, which is part of the employee life cycle perception measurement that we focus on, is going to have a massive impact on your reputation, your employer reputation in the marketplace. And so some organizations are quite dismissive of those two bookends experiences, and they don't pay enough attention to it. They're more difficult to measure what the emotional bond value that it is and strength is with those different cohorts. But there are definitely increasing ways that we can actually engage with prospective talent and past talent, to maintain relationships with past talent, to encourage them to be active promoters of our employer brand, and even, forgive the Australian term here, but boomeranging talent back to us in the future, where particularly if we're in a talent short market of high qualification or complex skill sets, where there's a limited number of candidates in the marketplace. If you are going to have people leave your organization, and let's hope it's for the right reasons, progress, experience, whatever it might be, if that talent pool just evaporates and disappears, or you close the door and you say, once you've left here, you never come back, you are missing an opportunity both to have them promote you as an employer, but also potentially to have that talent return to you in the future. So these bookend components of the employee life cycle are important. I know we came on this session to talk about attachment, but the emotional bond mechanism across the employee life cycle is really important for organizations to see differently to the way that we have historically and traditionally looked at engagement. Engagement is a lag measure. I said it before. It is a cohort aggregate view of what's happened. It's rear view mirror. And there are insights there, and we can make decisions about workplace practices. But when we look at emotional bonds, there is no one size fits all. we can strive for best practice induction and onboarding. We can strive for it. But actually, if you had two people doing exactly the same experience at exactly the same time with exactly the same manager, you are going to still get differences in the attachment bond that actually form. And it's because each person's expectations, each person's life experience, each person's needs in that moment are slightly different. And if we keep walking forward with this view that one size fits all and all we need to worry about is, did we do what we said we were going to do, that we said we thought was best practice? That's an employer-centric view about what we're going to do to you, rather than the employee-centric understanding of what's going on in terms of the formation of this bond. And then while the rest of our cohort continues on the journey, what happens to that emotional bond based on their experiences over time? And so that connection strength becomes a really important one for us, again, not to look at in the aggregate, but to look at in the individual, and ultimately drive meaningful conversations, trust-based conversations that forge a stronger emotional connection between the individual employee and the organization. And the primary carer is the most important part of that. If their engagement's dropping, and there's real reasons for it, right? We're seeing a massive change in organization structures happening at the moment. And we're seeing this notion of span of influence or span of control, a lot more pressure being brought to bear, particularly with operational level leaders, where they're expected to do more with less. And they're often having an increased number of direct reports. Now, if we think about that, and then they have a vacancy appear, and the typical response to a vacancy is going to be, oh, well, the manager needs to jump down back on the tools again. So they're doing a stopgap mechanism while trying to hire a new person and meant to be leading a group of people, not just on tactical, operational, and performance-based management, what I would call management. We're asking them to be leaders that actually form the emotional bond, maintain a strong emotional bond, and have this high level of intrinsic motivation and discretionary effort inside their workforce to maximize performance. We're setting them up without giving them the right training, without giving them the right tools, without giving them the right understanding. We're going to see a continued erosion of this, right? So, I love my HR clients and relationships with everyone, but we're at a moment where we've got to be real on what's going on here. And we've got to say, we've got to do something different to just what we traditionally have done.
And let's take a quick break. Good Morning HR is brought to you by Imperative, bulletproof background checks with fast and friendly service. I hope you're enjoying the conversation with my friend Anthony Sork. Big brain on this guy, even though he talks funny. After our conversation, Anthony sent me a note. For our listeners, he is offering a complimentary trial of the employee attachment inventory. This is for an employee who has commenced, which I think is Aussie for they've started working for you. They talk funny down there. And who will reach their 90th day of employment in the months of May, June, or July of 2026. I'm not getting any kickbacks from Anthony, but I'll tell you, it's a pretty cool tool. To claim this offer, visit the website and use the cheat code, both of which are in the show notes. Alternatively, you can email Anthony or the even more brilliant Selena. Their email addresses are also in the show notes. Also yesterday, I delivered the webinar called Managerial Discretion in Mitigating Gossip, Protecting Confidentiality, and Promoting Transparency when Managing Conflict. As I've said before, this is one of the hottest topics I'm presenting at conferences this year. We had over 300 people registered. Many of you were listeners, and thank you for doing that. But if you weren't one of those people who registered and came online yesterday, you can still watch the recording on our website for free and receive HRCI and SHRM Research credit. And you can find it all on our website at imperativeinfo.com/webinars. If you're an HRCI or SHRM certified professional, this episode of Good Morning HR has been pre-approved for 1/2 hour of recertification credit. To obtain the recertification information, visit goodmorninghr.com and click on Recert Credits. Then select episode 253 and enter the keyword attachment. That's ATTACHMENT. MENT. Quick reminder that we're releasing a one-page discussion starter you can use with your HR or leadership team to consider the relevance of the information in this episode to your organization. The link is in the show notes. And now back to my conversation with Anthony Sork.
And
you just struck a chord, because that is a drinking game on this podcast. How often we put managers in roles of leading people, but we do not train them to do what we want them to do. And so somebody's a great individual contributor, so we make them, the manager over the individual contributors. And so let's talk about that. What is the skill set that I, as a leader, frontline supervisor, whatever, need to have on day one when that new employee comes into my team? What are the skill sets that I need to be, so that I can do this authentically, and it's not a checklist. Like you said, it needs to be individualized to the employee, because every person's going to connect and attach differently. That seems like a really big lift for your average frontline manager. So what are the skill sets that they need to develop to be able to do that?
So organizations, I want to say really quickly, I'm not dismissive of centralized induction initiatives and programs and resources. I think they're wonderful, but they don't fit every person the same way. Yeah. Right. And so making sure that managers have a really good, first and foremost, that they themselves have a really strong connection to the purpose of the organization. So resetting our leaders regularly and realigning and recommitting them to that sense of, why am I here? Why does this matter? And what is this opportunity for me, not to just be a task and resource manager that drives performance, but how am I a people leader that actually builds that connection in my people to who we are as an organization, as a division, as a department, as a team, right? That connection to the purpose of each of those layers. And what is the incredibly important role that each of my team members are going to be doing to contribute to that purpose. So where is my understanding of that? Not from just the mechanics of it, right? Not just from the machinery, but actually the connection to purpose, and then the ability for us to switch on that intrinsic motivation inside our people, who turn up each day to say, I believe in what I'm doing. I know what is required of me. I have received the training and I've got the resources to be able to do that, but I'm choosing to be here because this is a place that I feel that I'm safe, I am trusted, I'm accepted, and that I belong here. So the skill of the leader, the frontline leader, is to say, more than just task and resource management to drive results. How do you build relationships with your people? How do you do that from the beginning, identifying who you want to bring in? How do you invest in a relationship with them where you see the individual, you seek to understand their individual circumstances, thinking and feeling, that you recognize that there's not one size fits all in our people. Everyone is different. Everyone has different individual circumstances, thinking, feeling going on. How do I then engage with my people, communicate, interact with my people, regardless of their workplace practices? If they're fully remote, then how I'm going to do that is going to be different to if they're in a flexible working or hybrid working scenario, is going to be different to if they're full-time in the office. But helping our managers to think about, what is the experience that I am actively investing in creating that allows me to invest in that individual where they feel that they're seen, they're understood, that they are supported and encouraged, and that they continue to connect to the purpose of what they're doing, that lifts that intrinsic motivation. That skill set, it's something that we actually don't do a lot in terms of investing in, certainly operational level manager. But to be honest with you, a large part of my practice is actually doing that work with executive teams and then cascading that through the different structures. It comes back to another big challenge, and that is, if you have a traditional view of investing in development of our people that is based on competency and skill set alone, then you're not going to be able to move your leaders to this space. You have to be able to invest in leadership development, which is understanding behavior, thinking patterns, behavioral intent, and actual behavior, and help move your workforce progressively towards more constructive leadership behavior across your full cohort. That is actually your biggest driver of culture shift within an organization. When it comes to attachment and connection, helping each individual manager understand that they have a really big role to play in how that strength of bond forms and is sustained in their people, and actively encourage them to think about how are you going about understanding that, influencing that, engaging with your people to sustain that as they work as part of your team while you are their primary carer. Now, training can do that to a degree, but also providing the right measures and tools that support their understanding and their growth, and then give them an accurate measure to know what I should talk about, when should I talk about it, and actually supporting them to have those conversations. That's actually why we actually created the instruments the way that we did. So it's not just simply a measure, but it's actually a consultative report that comes back. So when people use the attachment inventory, we're actually measuring the strength of the emotional bond, the experience the employee has had across 20 workplace drivers during that critical attachment period. But importantly, the report is about the impact of the primary carer up until that point. So what has the manager done to create that experience? And then what's this window of opportunity that they've got to strengthen that? The starting point of that is have a conversation. Actually get in there and say, hey, we want to make this the best possible onboarding experience that we can. This has been fantastic that you've been able to share. This has been your experience and this is how you're feeling. I think we've got an opportunity to actually strengthen that experience in these key areas. And let's develop an action plan together to make sure that this experience for you is maximizing that opportunity for you to feel that this is the place that you want to be. So helping them to have those conversations, Mike.
So that employee attachment inventory that you developed, and it's award winning and it's even patented. That product, and I think you said that's something you would deliver at 90 days
That's
to
right.
the new hire.
That's right.
So that means for the first 3 months, the manager's investing in this person, hopefully. But if you get into the end of that third month and you do this inventory and you realize this person doesn't have an attachment.
Yep. Or it's weak. Yep.
Yeah. Then what do we do? If we only have now, 4 months basically, and we've burned through the first 3.
Yeah.
Is it possible to save that and to build that attachment still in that last month?
Yeah. So the short answer is yes. But it depends, right? So the basic principle here is that if you as an organization have built a level of understanding and awareness of the phenomenon, if you're communicating that we're going to be measuring this, and that's kind of your backstop, yeah, but that actually we've got a cohort of managers that are actively thinking about trying to impact the bonding experience through the use of centralized induction experiences and their direct individual impact that takes place during that period of time. This measure becomes a little bit of a how did we go for you, without it being a pass-fail mark at that point in time, either for the manager or for the employee. And so attachment, the critical attachment period, 120 days, you're right. We measure it at the 90th day as the first valid and reliable indicator of what it would be at 120 days if nothing changed in the behavioral impact of the manager or the experience of the employee. But the goal of that would be to say, what do we do with that 30 days? You're not starting from zero at that point. You've actually had an impact. Organizations that might be using this for the first time may not have built that awareness and understanding in their cohort, but after a fairly short period of time, particularly if you've had a manager who has experienced a revolving door experience of talent, or for those managers who are in what we call the gateway roles, right, in gateway teams, where they are the access point often for a higher volume of talent, that then there is progression that happens from those teams. So there are those teams as well, right? And that's an intentional design for some organizations. But for those leaders, the real focus of this is the unwanted attrition component, or your quit and stayers, right? So when we have a look at that intervention opportunity is about saying how do I strengthen attachment by the 120th day, and definitely if you take action you will, right? So you then for that person create the best possible bond that you can, but it's kind of over at 120 days. I'll give you this side note. If it really is something that looks like it has failed, like attachment has failed, there's low attachment, and this is talent that you really do want to retain, you have one get out of jail card, and that is that you can change the primary carer. So when if you believe that you've got top talent in the market, you've paid a lot, by the way, to get them and to invest in them and to onboard them. But if you feel the risk of attrition is really high for that talent, then you can, as an organization, make the decision to realign them to a new primary care. And that resets your 120 days, by the way. There is some carryover, what we call legacy perceptions around organizational perception, but even those get a chance to be remolded. If you think of it as for the home renovators out there, mixing concrete or slow setting plaster, at the beginning it's fluid, it's liquid, and you can shape it into anything you want. Over the first 90 days, it's shaping, it's forming into this mold that we are creating as the primary carer, but it's still malleable between 90 days and 120 days. And so that is a really critical window. And most organizations, and to be fair, most managers, because they are super, super busy, right? Like I said before, they're carrying the workload of the vacancy that was created. They're trying to do everything for everyone, probably in a more reactive mode. They're being, there's demands around our managers at all levels all the time. And so this window often closes and passes by without us paying attention to it. And what we say is pay attention to it. There is no other investment in an organization that I have ever seen that is the same value investment that we make in recruitment of new talent, that we do not treat with the rigor and discipline and focus on managing that investment than we do with new talent. And it is a really strange thing that we have for such a long period of time put our managers in a position where we do stuff to our people, but we don't take a really close look at what is it that's actually happened to protect that investment and give those new people the best chance to feel that this is where they want to be and stay, longer than 3 years, right? The fact that we've got new hire sentiment, only 38% of new hires right now, based on the Qualtrics and Gallup measures, research that have been done, can see a future with the organization for 3 or more years. That's a problem for us, right? That's an attachment problem for us right there.
And so we're running up on time, but I want to dig a little deeper. You said the attachment survey covers, I think you said several dozen at least, top points. Give me 2 or 3 of those things that you're measuring in the attachment, and then specific things that behaviors that a manager should demonstrate in order to make those, to touch those points and make a connection.
There are 20 environmental drivers. So when you look at attachment in any social structure setting, Mike, you're going to have the 4 core perceptions remain the same, right? So security, safety, trust and value, acceptance and belonging. I repeat that, so that's the one thing people go away with, right? In terms of thinking, what if I was to...
So let's go through it again. Wait, so you said security?
So security and safety...
You talk funny compared to us Texans. I know.
So I've got to slow down.
So you said security. Security, and what was the next one?
So security, safety, right? Psychosocial safety, but safety and security has a number of subcategories to it, right? So physical, emotional, financial, reputational, they are all wound up in that core perception of security that is part of the bonding mechanism. Trust and value. So when we have a look at trust at the beginning of an employee relationship, if the recruitment and selection process has gone well, then there is a mutual high two-way trust expectation. From that point, the behavioral pattern of the manager will either sustain that or erode that, right? So that trust and value, the value perspective will shift based on the trust indicator. So value, when trust is high, from an employee perspective, it is about what value do I contribute and what value do I derive. If trust goes down, it becomes what value do I derive for as long as I'm here, and I'm less concerned about what I'm contributing. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So that's where engagement comes in. Then that's really that's really what drives engagement ultimately. Then it's a reflection of that, right?
As a sustained, proposition. That's right. If you erode trust in any workforce, you are going to directly reduce the desire to contribute value. You are going to emphasize the perception of what value can I take for as long as I'm here. But that diminishing discretionary effort through to low engagement sort of gets at that resting point of how do I contribute enough to keep my job, right? That safety perspective. When someone is in active disengagement, that's a different proposition. That might be another podcast that we'll talk about. But disengagement is where you get toxic, destructive behaviors starting to come into the mix. So we're just talking here about that trust value proposition relative to engaged employees, but highly engaged employees, highly attached employees, you sustain this high desire to contribute and desire to gain proposition. Acceptance is the third one. And for anyone who, I grew up, I was born into a small country town, Mike. So I don't know whether it comes across, but maybe all Australians appear that way. I don't know for the Texans. We're very similar, the Texans and the Australians. And it's why I love coming and spending time with you guys over there. I'm accepted when I come over there. And I feel like there's a real sense of belonging when I'm there with you guys as well, right? So this notion of the pre-existing group of people that are the social structure and someone new joining. How does that person feel about how accepted they are by that cohort? And you asked me way back at the beginning, what can we do as part of the pre-boarding, like the pre-employment phase, which is one of the drivers, the pre-employment phase. What are we doing even before day one to make that person feel like we already see you as part of the team. You don't have to worry about acceptance because it's our long lost member has finally arrived, right? So how do we create that anticipation of being accepted, and then how do we shape that over the first 120 days? And then the fourth element is going to be belonging. Right now, belonging is that back to that. I may feel accepted here, but is this the place that I feel I want to be? And that's back to that sense of connection to purpose. It's a connection to the way in which I feel the behavior pattern of my primary carer and actually all the leaders within my line of sight behave that impact my perception of the culture that we have in this environment and how people see and treat the people here. So relative to the purpose of what we do as an organization, but how we experience our life here and how we're treated, that has a major impact on that perception of belonging in that first 120 days. And so the 20 environmental drivers touch on things such as senior leadership perception, manager accessibility and alignment, pre-employment, orientation, and there is a list of 20 drivers, and each one of them has different inputs that we're able to measure and spit out at the other end a roadmap of where's the strong bond happened and where do you have some work to do for this individual based on their experience.
Interesting. Okay, so something you said just set off a light bulb for me, and that we talk about acceptance and belonging, and so often in many of the conversations around those two, they almost seem interchangeable. But the way you just pointed that out it makes so much more sense, because I've never thought about the belonging part as somebody saying to themselves, I belong here. This is where I belong. And that's completely different than, like you said, just saying, oh yeah, they accept me. Maybe they even like me. Maybe I know they like me, but I don't, I'm not connected enough to this organization to say this is where I belong. That's the whole wake up in the morning and think, oh shit, I have to go to work today. I have to, when you're feeling that's not where you belong. Okay.
Right.
When this is not what I'm called to do, or however you want to look at it in your world perspective. So that's really helpful for me, just in clarifying that what we really should be talking about, at least when we talk about belonging.
Totally.
But you know what? we have been going on for 45 minutes.
I can't believe it. I'm a good talker,
It's
Mike. You knew that. That's fine.
no, it was interesting. It blew by. I want to follow up, um, and I understand Selena is even your partner and business and in life, your wife,
Yes.
is even maybe even more passionate than you about this. So maybe we get the two of you on, or maybe I
Yeah.
just get lucky and just get to talk to her for an hour. But
She'd love that. She'd love that.
we'll definitely schedule this. I really appreciate you joining me. Thank you, Anthony. It was a great conversation.
Mike, I love spending time with you, and I hope that we've delivered something of value to your audience, mate. Thank you so much for having me on, and I hope to engage with anyone that's listening. We Australians, we love having a chat. So anyway, great to see you. Thank you so much.
And all of Anthony's contact information, just like all our guests, is in the show notes. And to you, dear listeners, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please write us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you're listening. And just, by the way, I just found out this morning that we are number 38 in business management on Apple Podcasts. So thank you for listening, and thank you for rating us. I really appreciate that. And share this episode on your favorite social media platform. It helps us reach more listeners, and maybe it makes social media a little less poisonous. We'd love to hear your thoughts at goodmorninghr.com. And don't forget to download the discussion starter PDF. Good Morning HR is produced by Marianne Martinez and Paco Corral on Imperative's marketing team. The Good Morning HR theme music was created by Steve Pegler at HR Strategies of Texas. And I'm Mike Coffey. As always, don't hesitate to reach out if I can be of service to you personally or professionally. I'll see you next week, and until then, be well, do good, and keep your chin up.